Hello! So today we are here for another episode of my Spanish media diary. So what I have been consuming in native Spanish content. We will start with movies. I've only watched one Spanish movie since the last episode, and that was Huesera, or The Bone Woman. And this is a Mexican movie, I believe, that I heard about thanks to the mini immersion Discord, Leafling Learns, Follow, etc. This is a horror movie that is centered around a young mother who, it's kind of a discussion of postpartum depression and that sort of thing. And very, very interesting movie. I really, really enjoyed it. It is disturbing, obviously, because it's a horror movie, but I do recommend it if you like horror movies. For TV, I watched 3 shows on rtve. So if you are outside of the US, I believe this is free everywhere outside the US, I think. And in the US, this is a $5 a month subscription unless you have a VPN or something like that. But I watched 3 seasons of the show La Caza. This is kind of a police investigation show, but not very procedural, much more focused on the, people and everything involved. So the first season is following the story of 2 missing children. So they were abducted 5 years before the start of the show, if I'm remembering correctly, and they are obviously trying to find them, and so it's following the families in this small town. These seasons did go in order of preference for me, so the first season was my favorite season. The second season is set on Mallorca, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, and in this one a priest has been killed by someone in a mask, and it's like a festival mask kind of thing, and so they are trying to discover who that was and what the motivation was. Again, lots of disturbing content surrounding children, probably fairly obvious where that's going. Again, this was kind of my second favorite, I guess. I didn't like it as much as the first season, but it was okay. The third season is following a mass shooter event. A young man with schizophrenia who commits a multiple shooting, and then they are trying to determine why, kind of what the motivation was. And I initially was extremely concerned about this, and remained concerned about it for sure, because of, stigma around mental illness and the association between mental illness and mass shooting events, which, it was very difficult to watch as an American, with a completely different context surrounding mass shootings. Obviously, here in the US, they are relatively extremely common, and so there's a completely different mindset, I guess, or a different set of misconceptions here versus somewhere like Spain, where they are virtually unheard of. So if this had been an American show, I probably would have just instantly stopped watching it, because I think the handling of a mass shooting event done by someone with schizophrenia in a TV show would be virtually impossible to get right, because that is so not the reality of mass shootings here in the United States. But I did think that they handled it okay, I guess. I don't know. It was very strange. I had very, very mixed feelings about this season in general. I thought it was fairly thoughtful in the way that it handled mental illness, but it also, had some messages that I found kind of concerning and very strange. So I guess, if you've watched it, I would love to discuss with you what you thought of it, because kind of the conversation around medication and everything I found extremely confusing. And so, yeah. Then I watched Traición, which only has 1 season, and this is about a family whose kind of patriarch is terminally ill, and they are figuring out how they are going to split up the law firm that they own as a family, what kind of decisions they are going to make. And so there's lots of family drama, family secrets coming out. This was okay. I didn't love this by any stretch, but it was entertaining to watch. I feel like they did think they were going to get another season and then didn't, because there was stuff that was unresolved at the end. But yeah, it was okay. If you like kind of family drama, businessy things, it was okay, but it's not something I would like strongly recommend. Then I watched the 2 seasons that are out. I think this is a continuing show, but the second season just came out. Is called Ser o No Ser, and this is about a trans teen in Barcelona who has just started a new school in order to study acting, and so he and his 2 best friends are there to study, and he kind of has the opportunity to basically start over without anyone knowing him, and is kind of figuring out how to navigate that space. So that's essentially the first season is almost entirely focused on that. I really liked this show. I liked the characters and the discussions, obviously very, openly discussing LGBTQ+, etc. The only thing that I didn't like, and I think that they might have gotten feedback about this and kind of altered it for the second season, was the fact that the first season is almost entirely centered around coming out, but either as trans or gay or whatever. And I understand that that is obviously a very important topic for most LGBTQ+ people, but it's not the only thing that matters, and it also shouldn't be like an imperative, and it kind of was presented as an imperative. Like, it was very much, you should come out, was kind of the message. They were definitely going into it with the understanding that it would be safe for you to come out, but I just didn't understand the emphasis on it, and I think again that they must have gotten feedback to that effect, because in the second season they do really clarify, like, it's only your business if you want to, and you don't have to, and like, yeah, so I did like the second season of this better than the first season, but both of them were good, and this is a much shorter show. I think they're half-hour episodes instead of like an hour or more, so much lower commitment, and yeah, I really, really enjoyed this. I will say there is a lot of Catalan in this show, so it's definitely not fully Spanish immersion, but there are Spanish subtitles printed on the screen when they're talking in Catalan, so regardless, I do still recommend the show. And then Netflix shows. We will see whether this is in this video along with previous Netflix shows, or whether this gets pushed on to the next video, depending on where they are in union negotiations. But I have finished 2 Netflix shows. One of them was Smiley, which again, this is about the LGBTQ+ community in Barcelona again, and a very different style of show than Ser or No Ser. This is about adults, for one thing. We are following, I forget his name now because I watched this quite a while ago, but we were following a gay bartender in Barcelona, and kind of his boss is a lesbian in a long-term relationship, and there are some other characters that we're following as well. But essentially the entire premise of the show is that there's a misdialing. Someone leaves a message for someone that they didn't intend to, and then that kind of leads to going out on a date, and then a lot of like miscommunications and misunderstandings between people, which ordinarily I hate miscommunication trope, especially in books, but also in anything. It was at times frustrating to watch, but overall a very, very endearing show. It is set around Christmas time, so it would be a fun thing to watch around Christmas, and I don't think it's getting renewed, but I wish that it was. It was a nice show to watch. I didn't like how it ended for some of the characters, but yeah, I'm glad I watched it. Then I did watch season 1 of Valeria, and I did not like this show at all. This is definitely my least favorite show on this list. So this is an adaptation of a book series, and I have heard that people who loved the book series hated the show adaptation. So at some point, if I am able to get audiobooks of the books from like Storytel or something like that, I may try the books because I liked the concept. So essentially you're following this character, Valeria, who is trying to be an author, and it's, a bumpy road. She's not very happy in her relationship, and so she's kind of trying to navigate whether to stay in her marriage or there are other people that she's potentially interested in. But in the show, she just comes off as the most selfish person alive, like ever. She's not very like selfless with her friends, certainly not with her husband. And like, I just the whole time was like, why don't you just get a divorce? I definitely won't continue with the TV show. Was Perfil Falso. This is a like very telenovela-y limited series kind of thing that is similar to all of the catfishing themed shows that have come out recently, like the dating scams, the Tinder scammer, and all of those type of shows. And it was super entertaining. The main actress is an actor that was in Who Killed Sarah, which I ended up hating that show, but I did really like the actor. It did drag a little bit. It was a little bit longer than it needed to be. It set up this whole thing, and then it kind of just drug that out a little bit and then finally resolved it at the end, but it was okay. If you like really dramatic shows like that, then I would say give it a try. Next, I watched La Valla, and I really, really liked this. It is like a little bit weird to talk about because it came out in 2020, and so obviously they had no idea when they were like writing and filming this what was going to happen, but it is like a kind of post-apocalyptic, almost authoritarian regime that takes place after a virus has come, wipes out a lot of people, and also severe like environmental devastation, like natural resource depletion. So they are living in an authoritarian state that I think was inspired by the Franco regime. It is a Spanish show as well, I forgot to say. Perfil Falso was Mexico and Colombia, I think. So, I mean, it's talking about like fascism and an authoritarian like military police state, but because of, fear-mongering around the government and stuff in 2020 and on, it does read a little bit weird now with that perspective, but again, you have to remember that like they did not know that was going to happen. So I really, really liked this. So it's following this family. So they are just kind of trying to keep themselves safe, but they end up involved in this kind of government cover up when their child is taken from them. So this is quite a violent show. Most of these are actually, but this one does have a lot of like state violence and violence against children. So if that is an issue for you, definitely be aware of that. But I really liked this one. This one is probably in my top 5 Spanish shows. Then I watched Si lo hubiera sabido. I can't say that one smoothly. It's like a tongue twister. And this is another nonsense show. So our protagonist is like in her 30s. She has twins, and she has decided that she wants to get a divorce. But then at the time that I think she wants to like announce this or something, she ends up going back in time to, I think, 10 years beforehand when her husband was about to ask her to marry him. And so she has the opportunity to do everything differently, and she does that, but then realizes, that she's not going to have her kids, and, is kind of trying to navigate that world. And yeah, this one was kind of the same as Perfil Falso, where I felt like we got lost a little bit in the middle, but overall, it was an entertaining watch. This was less engaging, I would say, than Perfil Falso, but also less like soap opera-y, so I don't know. They were both okay. Then I just finished the show Desenfrenadas, and this one had been on my list for a long time, but my internet friend Tiasha told me that I had to watch it, and so I did, and I loved it. So this one has probably tied for my favorite Spanish show. That's a bold statement, but This one and La Flor Más Bella are probably my favorite Spanish shows. This one is significantly more like adult themes than La Flor Más Bella, but we are following 3 girls in their early 20s in Mexico who are really, really struggling in life, whether with their careers, their relationships, their family, all sorts of different things are going on, but they end up going on this road trip and they are joined by another girl or woman in her early 20s who is having significantly more, serious, pressing, dangerous issues, and they all have to kind of navigate their own, their privileges, their issues, their, mental health struggles and very real problems. I probably did not sell that very well, but this was really, really, really fun to watch. And I really wish that it had more than 1 season, but it does not. It was canceled. This was, in my opinion, quite difficult to understand. A lot of them spoke with a lot of slang and also slang that I'd never really heard of before. It was a little bit of a challenge, but I like that. So I think that is one that I might rewatch with double subtitles at some point, just to pick up on some of the things that I did not get the first time and learn some more slang. So books, I listened to the first 2 books in the Kadabra series, which is a series for children that I do think is illustrated. So if I continue with the series, I definitely want to read along with the ebooks instead of just listening to them. But this is following a very young witch who has moved to this town. She didn't know that she was a witch yet until she moves to this town, and then they essentially, the other witches find her and she joins the club, and so they all have little familiars and are doing little witchy things, and yeah, it was cute. Nothing to write home about, but if you need like a good young target audience read, it was cute so far. I read Retrato in Sepia from Isabel Allende. This is the second, I believe. Yeah, this is the second in the trilogy that House of the Spirits is part of. And so this is following some of the ancestors of the people in that book, and also some of the people in that book when they're younger. I haven't liked any book in the series as well as House of the Spirits yet. That is my favorite. Not yet. They're done. That one is my favorite. I felt like we were following a very, very, very slow story, and I was a little bit less invested in the main character of this story than the first one, and certainly than the House of the Spirits. I still enjoyed it. She writes incredibly. They are really, really great, well-developed characters and everything, but still a great book. I definitely recommend the series overall for sure. Then I read España no es solo blanca, and this is by someone that I follow on Instagram who is afropoderossa, and so that she definitely is in my list of recommended Instagrams to follow as well. And so she is someone originally from Equatorial Guinea. She lived in, I think, 2 African countries and then moved to Spain for medical reasons, I think, as a teenager, and then I think has lived there ever since. And so this is kind of partially a memoir telling her life story and her experiences being a Black woman in Spain, as well as historical figures that have shaped the history of Spain. So kind of refuting the idea that Spain's history has been solely white people. So yeah, great book. Absolutely recommend it. It was a really quick read. I just got the ebook on Kobo, and yeah, definitely recommend it. I listened to the book El extraño verano de Tom Harvey. This is kind of an Agatha Christie-esque mystery book. So we are following Tom Harvey, who is an American living in Italy. He gets a call from his ex-father-in-law one evening and he doesn't answer. And then a couple days later, he finds out that immediately after that call, his father-in-law died in kind of suspicious circumstances. And so he goes back to, be with his ex-wife for the funeral and everything, and they kind of start trying to figure out what happened, and various, twists and turns occur. This was okay. I kind of needed just like a mindless mystery kind of thing where I didn't have to pay super close attention, and it was just entertaining. So for that, this was pretty good. Do I think it was an objectively really good book? Probably not. The main character was so annoying. He just kept trying to figure out how to get his ex-wife to sleep with him again. It wasn't like super reading from some like lech perspective at all, but it was just kind of like when you thought about the bigger perspective and you were like, her dad just died and she divorced you. Like, why are you trying to make this happen? But anyway, it was fine. I would probably listen to something else from the author, but I'm not like, wow, new favorite author. Like, definitely no Dolores Redondo. Okay, so podcasts. I have been in my podcast era, but I haven't finished too many or felt like I had listened to enough of them to really be able to recommend them. 2 podcasts from Wondery that I have listened to quite a bit of. The first one is El Psiquiatra de Lado, which is in English, The Shrink Next Door. This has been adapted into Spanish. It actually has both a Latin American and a Spain Spanish version, but the Spain Spanish version is still paywalled at this time. This is it's like a mini series of episodes talking about this really strange thing where this psychiatrist was essentially manipulating at least one of his patients. We're following the story of one of his patients who essentially allowed him to take over his house, a lot of his business, like all of this stuff is very strange. This happened a long time ago, I think in the 80s, and it was very, very interesting. I had listened to it before in English, so I re-listened to it in Spanish, and yeah. Then I have listened to a couple seasons of Guerras de Negocios, so I listened to most of the Coke versus Pepsi one, and then I kind of fizzled out. I didn't really care that much anymore. I listened to Walmart versus Amazon, Red Bull versus Monster. So these are all about like, business wars, like different companies in competition with each other. So if you like any of that kind of stuff, it can be interesting. I don't really care when it's just like business tactics, like, that was kind of why I fizzled out on Coke versus Pepsi. But when they have kind of like a human rights aspect to them, I find them a little bit more interesting. So then finally, our Instagram recommendations. It's funny because one of these just got her main account back after I made this list. So I assume it must be genesisyamille. So it'll be on the screen, but she had created a second account, so it had a 2 on the end because she had lost access to her main account, but now she has her main account back, so you can follow that one. She is a Puerto Rican who I started following her when she was traveling around New Zealand in a converted camper van. I'm not sure exactly what she's doing right now, because again, she just got her account back and stuff. Very, very fun travel content. And then leyendoalatinoamerica. This is a relatively new account. I think it's started sometime this year, but they pick a country from Latin America every month to recommend a couple books from. It's kind of like an informal book club. And so I have gotten some really good authors and titles to look up for my own Reading Around the Spanish World project, which is a little bit stalled out right now. So I need to use this fresh material for inspiration. Afrocolectivx, commentary type explanatory videos, and they are really, really great. Kiwi Celeste is a woman from New Zealand who is in a relationship with someone from Uruguay, I believe, and they travel all over the world and make videos totally in Spanish, but it is quite comical as she, is trying to learn Spanish. Like, her Spanish is quite good, but there are things, that she'll make like outraged videos about. It's quite entertaining. Lastly, I cannot even make sense of what I wrote here, but I know that her name is Alessandra and it'll be on the screen. But this is I believe a Peruvian woman who makes videos about various things, and she had a really great one about the Quechua language. So yeah. So that is everything that I have today, and if you have recommendations, definitely leave them in the comments, and I will see you in the next video.